Hi, welcome to the Zoom support session. This is a video recording. It's not actually the session itself, the help session itself, but it's a separate recording I'm making to contain the material that we covered in the section and hopefully do it a little bit more compactly for those of you who were at the session to review, for those of you who weren't at the session to know what it was that we talked about. Just to start out, I'm Tim Mills, and I'm a member of the Arts Remote Teaching Support Team, working under the Arts Pedagogy Working Group. And our team's role is to help instructors prepare for remote teaching in the fall or whenever you're going to be remote teaching. Our team, including myself, are instructors, people who have taught and taken online courses, remote courses, and we're trying to draw on our expertise and what we've learned from people like the experts at CTL and our IST experts to bring that information to as many instructors as possible in as digestible a format as possible. In this session, I'll be going through some of the main points of using Zoom in your teaching. What I won't be doing, I'm not going to cover very fine-grained troubleshooting stuff in Zoom. For that, the internet broadly, Google searches, and in particular, our IST knowledge base and CTL might be a better source for that kind of help. And I'm not going to cover the deep pedagogical reasoning behind how you might choose to use Zoom or choose not to use Zoom, the pedagogical reasons, pro and con. A lot of that, it's educational developer expertise that really you need for that. And so I'd recommend going to the CTL pages for that. They've put together a lot of resources that can really help you think through how the teaching that you want to do can be done online remotely, and how Zoom might work into that. Okay, and there are some links in the notes for this video to get you started with that if you're not sure where to start with those resources. So the main topics I'm going to talk about are how to set up a station to do your Zoom teaching. And I'm going to be focusing on live sessions here, live interactions, recording videos using Zoom and other tools. It's going to be another support session that we offer. I'm going to talk about how you could include your TAs or other colleagues in your Zoom teaching session, so having some collaborative effect there, and also just ways to facilitate student interaction in a Zoom environment. Okay. If you have any questions about what I cover here, of course, this is a static video, so you won't be able to ask them immediately, but you can always email me as the director of the support team at timills@ualberta.ca. That address is in all in the recent Arts Pedagogy Working Group communications. You can look me up, Tim Mills, and the Department of Linguistics, and so on. Okay, so let's get started. When you're setting up your computer and work area, the thing you want to keep in mind is that you want your students to be able to hear you, first off, and ideally to see you as well, right? Keep in mind, not all students will be able to join by video. Zoom does have phone-in options, and there may be students who choose or even have to use that option for some reason. They won't have video. And students with a very low bandwidth connection may get sort of jerky, the sync it'll fall out of sync. If they disable their video, that can help with that. So those students may not have video. That is, you might not be able to see their face. They'll still be seeing you and the other people who are able to transmit video. So when you do your setup and you know that students are going to be listening to you, students are going to be looking at you, here's some things to look at. Now, I'm a phonetician by training, so audio is where I'm going to start. Basically, you want an uncluttered space, and in the audio sense, that means you don't want to have other people active in the same room as you while you're teaching over Zoom. and you may be able to completely shut people out of the room. You may not. Do your best, of course. If you have to share an office space with a partner that you're living with, or something like that, then do that. But to the extent that you can, don't have people wandering around in the background of your video. Um, Sorry, I said I'd start with audio, didn't I? Audio, same idea. If there are people walking around and doing stuff in the same room, then that's going to cause noise. Uh, Use headphones. Now, I'm on a static thing, so I don't have to have the headphones in because there's nothing for me to listen to right now. But if you're interacting with students, you're going to want headphones in so that you hear them. There are various reasons for that. One is that you tend to get better sound that way, um, unless you have amazing speakers. The other is that one of the problems people sometimes have, especially with large group Zoom meetings, is that if someone is listening through a speaker and they have their mic turned on, the mic will pick up what's coming through the speaker, and you get sound that's coming out of the speaker, going into the mic, coming out of the speaker. It's a feedback loop, and it becomes screechy and squealy, and that's awful for everyone involved. Except, ironically, the person who's doing it, they don't tend to hear the squeal. So if people are complaining about a feedback squeal or something like that, and you don't hear it, it's because you have that happening at your end. The immediate solution is to mute the person responsible, whether it's you or whether it's a student. The longer term solution is to make sure that person has headphones, because then they can be speaking like I am, and any sound that's coming through is going to come through the headphones, and sound in the headphones isn't going to get past the ears. It's not going to make it to your microphone, wherever that is. It's good to know where the microphone is. For this recording, I'm wearing a lapel mic, but a lot of people, if you're recording to if you're Zooming on your laptop will have a microphone somewhere. Sometimes it's just a little pinprick hole in the case somewhere. It's good to know where that is, because you don't want to, if you have a book, you don't want to accidentally set the book down and it happens to be over the mic and suddenly you're muffled and you don't know why. And all of the technical fixes and settings that you fix in your computer aren't going to change it because you've got a book on the microphone, right? So it's good to know where the microphone is. That's also, acoustically speaking, that's who you're speaking to. That's where the sound is going. Okay. The other thing about audio is that there are background noises in our environment that we don't tend to notice because our ears are really good at tuning them out. When you're in the kitchen, unless now that I'm mentioning it, you'll hear your fridge, but you don't tend to notice it. But it comes through very loudly in a recording. A microphone tends to hear more of the background, pick up more of the background than your ears do. If you're in or near a kitchen, a dishwasher, or if you're near a laundry facility, that those machines can make a lot of noise that your ears tune out really well, but the microphone doesn't. Of course, again, you're not going to have full control over your environment. Do what you can to keep it as undistracting as possible. On the video side, same idea. You don't want to have distracting things in the background. And the exact background that you go for, you may have a lot of choice, you may not. I have one spot where I can set up my computer and I have my bookcases in the background. There's a bit of tidying you can see that I could do. This bright window here is not optimal. If I were feeling a bit more energetic, I might put a sheet over it for recording just so that it's not quite as glary there. I have light coming in here. Ideally, your light is sort of maybe not full frontal, but more from the front than from the side or the back. If someone is presenting from the back, then they'll tend to become more shadowed, and that's not ideal if the light is coming from straight behind them. Yeah, be as undistracting as possible. One of the rules of thumb is it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Your students aren't expecting you to be teaching from a professional video transmission studio, right? Unless that's what you're teaching, in which case that's pretty cool. But it doesn't have to be. The thing to go for is you don't want the environment, the acoustic and the visual environment, to distract your students from the reason they're there, the reason they're on that Zoom call, which is to learn from you, right? And to interact with you about the ideas, the topic that you're teaching, right? One of the things that I'll point out specifically, there's people have a lot of fun with the virtual backgrounds in Zoom. I think those are really cool. There's two problems with them. One is that they can increase the bandwidth, they can increase the load on your computer. So if you, like me, have a slightly older computer, you may want to uh, avoid that just because your computer is going to have trouble with it. And the other is that the boundary between the virtual background, that sort of the computer is in real time putting in place of whatever's really behind you, the boundary between that and your clothes and your face, what you actually want to be visible, uh, it's a bit jittery and it can be distracting. And like I said, you don't want anything in your setup to be more distracting than it has to be for your students. And some of us are more easily distracted by things like that than others. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay. In general, for audio and video, what you want to do is you want to test your setup, because when you're talking at the screen, you don't notice all of that. You will, if like me, I can see the Zoom is showing me what I look like, and uh, you have some sense of the visual, but it isn't live feeding me back my audio, and it won't for you. It's good to have a colleague. There's going to be someone else around you, academically speaking, maybe not physically speaking, someone else that you can connect with to uh, share this test. Set up a Zoom call, try your environment, ask, how do I sound? How do you sound? You can hear what's in the background. Um, and you can find some of these things that you might be able to work on uh, by doing that. Okay. Um, yeah. So that's the audio and video setup. Now, what about using having if you have a TA or someone else that you're co-teaching with, um, there's a thing that you can do in Zoom. As a presenter, you have a row of icons along the bottom, and one of them is participants. And as the host, as the person who's starting up the call, you can identify another participant and set them as a co-host. If you are the one who started the call, you are automatically the host, but you can set any number of others as hosts and co-hosts. Uh, and what that does is it gives them some of the controls I'm going to talk about in a minute uh, to help manage the session. I like, whenever possible, to have a TA or someone else. If I'm doing the presenting, I want someone else to be helping me out, especially if it's a large group. One of the really nice things, this is feeding into the interaction with students. One of the really nice things is the chat utility, the chat window, where while I'm gassing on, someone can be, I have this question, they'll post it in the chat. And if I choose to set up my teaching this way, I will have the TA or the other person that's with me um, monitoring the chat, responding as where possible to those text questions, and also just keeping a tally of when I pause for a breath. Eventually, they can say, "Hey, Tim, so and so, someone's asked this question, can you address that?" And that way I'm focusing on the teaching that I'm doing, the talking that I'm doing, and I'm not watching the chat. Watching the chat while you do Zoom is kind of like distracted driving. In fact, it's kind of like going on Twitter while you're lecturing. That would be really unprofessional in a classroom. uh, Depending, I mean, if you're teaching about Twitter, then I suppose maybe not entirely unprofessional, but that it could be distracting. If you're anything like me, if I try to watch the chat, then I lose the train of what I'm saying. And so being able to divide that, one way to do it is with someone else in the room who can monitor that and sort of uh, check that channel for you. Another way, uh, whether you have a TA with you or someone else, or if you're on your own, is to say, okay, I'm going to talk about this topic, and then I'm going to take a break and I'll check the chat, and I'll, wait till then, and I will address what comes up in the chat. Okay, so then the students know that they can use the chat. You will get to it, but they're not expecting you to be monitoring it. They're not getting impatient because you haven't addressed the thing that they brought up. Okay, so it's a lot of this is about setting expectations. Okay. Um, Now, other ideas that come in with student interaction. Uh, a lot of this, of course, will depend on the size of group. If you have a small group, a little seminar that has maybe half a dozen people in it, maybe a dozen, maybe you'll just want to all have your mics on and you can have a conversation uh, almost like if you were sitting around a conference table in a little seminar room, right? Um, but once it gets larger and larger, it may be a lower threshold than if you're in a room with people, you're going to want some kind of structured, moderated discussion. Um, and so there are various ways to do that. One way is everyone, the host and the students, the teacher and the students, have a participants tab that they can click in Zoom, and the students, the attendees, can there's a little button that basically says put up your hand, and then the host in their participant section can see in the list, they can see all the people that have their hands up, and that list will be ordered. The first person who put their hand up will be at the top, and then the second, and so on. So it's a really nice way of ordering that and helping. If you know, calling on people with their hands up is what you want to do, that's a great way to do it, especially if you have a big group. Of course, if everyone was on video and you could see them all at once, they could do this, and you can say, okay, I'm going to call on you, and they'll have their little name that you can call on. The name is in the window. But even in the gallery view, where you see all the little thumbnails of people's videos, um, first of all, not everyone's going to have video, as I said before, so you don't want to leave those people out. Secondly, if there's more than, on my screen, it can get up to about 20 before it says, okay, I've got this page, and you can click a button to see the next page of faces. Um, so if someone's on the other page and they're doing this in their video, well, that's not going to help because you don't see them. You can be clicking back and forth as much as you want, and that would get kind of distracting, but you're still likely to miss that. So the hands up icon in the participant screen is a really useful tool for that. Let's see. Yeah. And we have a link for getting audience feedback during a meeting. This is a Zoom link, so they're talking about it in terms of meeting rather than teaching, but it's the same idea, right? The same basic technology. Um, a moderated discussion in a classroom, you have to let people, and in a Zoom meeting, for the most part, this will be true as well. You rely on people to just not talk until it's appropriate for them to talk. In a Zoom meeting, you actually have, as the host and as the co-host, technological controls to force them to shut up. You can mute them. Of course, you want to use that. You may want to use that with a light touch, depending on the kind of dynamic you expect to have. What else? The other main things that you have in Zoom are that you can share a screen. So I'm going to share my screen here really quickly, just so you can see. You'll see my notes that I'm working on here. You can see that I'm almost at the summing up section. You can share the screen. You can do whatever you would do on your desktop with your shared screen, and people will see that. There's a setting in Zoom to determine whether the sound, if you're doing something on your screen that has audio attached to it, whether that audio is going to be piped through to the meeting or not. So that's something to keep in mind. There is a technological sort of bit of advice. If you're going to show people a video, it's better for everyone's bandwidth if you send them the link and have them open, say, a YouTube video in a separate window, than if you try to project the YouTube from your shared screen through. I don't know exactly why that is, but this is the advice that I've had from the technical experts that I follow. So I'm passing it on to you. You can also, there's a whiteboard function, and I have tried this here. It's also under the share screen button in the Zoom interface. I have tried this before with these recordings. Here's my whiteboard. What I found, I'm going to try, and I have a multiple screen set up here that doesn't always behave itself. What I found is that when I'm doing the recording, it doesn't always show the whole whiteboard. So you may be seeing part or none of what I'm doing here. I've just written a bit of text on a whiteboard. I'm doing a little bit of a scribble, very rounded thing around the text, and so on. You can play around with that. Besides the fact that my setup here doesn't doesn't really do the recording of it very well. There are also other reported glitches that sometimes happen with the whiteboard. A lot of people use alternate versions, alternate whiteboards that you can look up, and we can support. We can give some support on that in another session if people are interested. So that's a bit about presenting. Um, and the other main function that you'll come across and you may want to use is breakout rooms. If you have a large class and you want to get people into smaller groups, Zoom has a good automated feature. There's a breakout rooms button on the bottom, the toolbar for presenters. You click it, and it gives you an interface that asks, how many rooms do you want to break out into? Do you want to break people out automatically, where I just say, 5 rooms. So if I have 30 people, it'll put 6 people in each room, for example. Or I can do it manually, and I can say I want these 3 people in this room and these 5 people in that room, and so on. There is also some functionality in Zoom, in principle, to pre-assign breakout rooms. So if you have persistent groups across your semester, you've got your students, they've been put into tutorial groups or work groups or something. There is some functionality where you can use those preset groups, but it's really tricky. It working depends on both the host and every participant having a particular version of Zoom that they're using to attend the meeting so that it can identify people appropriately. And I've heard, it's hard to force students, especially with Zoom, where just clicking a link and your web browser will get you. It's hard to force them to use the other version of Zoom so that you can do these breakout rooms. If you think you can manage it, if that's going to work for you, then go ahead. There's some support material on the eClass support on CTL to help you with that, and I can link to that. But I would warn you that if you're not going to be able to enforce everyone's using the same version, I have a Linux computer here, and I don't have access to that version that does that special breakout thing. So these are the things, some things to consider when you're thinking, what are the actual, like in practice capabilities of this system versus the ones that are advertised and in principle could be accessible. Okay. Another thing to remember about breakout rooms is that when you go to a breakout room, the Zoom interface treats it like a new Zoom meeting. So your chat from the main meeting is going to go away, and you're going to get a new chat from the breakout room. When you go back into the main meeting, the breakout room chat will disappear, and you may or may not get back the full chat with all the history. We've had mixed results, and I can't tell you exactly what the conditions are that make it work or not work. So that's something to watch out for if you are using the chat and relying on the chat. There are ways you can sort of select and copy and paste chat content out of Zoom if you want to preserve it for some reason. So I think that's a good amount of material, introductory Zoom material to consider and to think about. A lot of actually making it work is trying it out. So like I said, that's one of the reasons that we're producing these videos to share, is so that you can have the video in a corner and you can actually be trying this out with a colleague, ideally with a colleague. So there's a presenter and an audience, a simulated student. Try it out, see what you can do, play around. The best thing to become comfortable, I'm not saying necessarily an expert, but to become comfortable with any technology that you're going to use, is to play around with it a little bit, see where it goes, see where it doesn't go, and then you can decide how it's going to fit into your teaching. Try out the different controls that I've mentioned. Try out different controls that you find that I haven't mentioned. I definitely haven't talked about everything. The metaphor that my father introduced to me ages ago is some of the software is like using a jumbo jet to drive down the street. There's going to be a lot of knobs and whistles that you don't ever need to use, but this is a tool we have. It'll get us there. Try not to get distracted by all the bells and whistles. So yeah, have a session with a colleague, check out the audio, make sure that it's clean, check out that the visual side works back and forth, and try some of the different features that you think you might like to use with your students. And Yeah, that's all the prepared material I have for this session. Uh, like I said, I will post some links in the notes for this video, and we're sharing this video and information about upcoming live sessions and whatnot uh, in the communications from the arts pedagogy working group. So watch for those. And I hope this is helpful. I look forward to hearing from everyone about how we can support your teaching as we all head into fall 2020 teaching. Thanks for watching.